Hello and welcome to Bottom Line. We have a terrific show for you today. I have my guest who I'm welcoming back here. He's the author of WorkHacks. I would like to welcome again author, speaker, Angelo Caruso. Welcome to the show.
Hey Sandy, good to see you again.
Tell us about, this is your latest book. You were here before on Cool Ideas, which gave us a lot of great ideas there, and now WorkHacks. And I know you kind of gave this a particular name because hacks might mean something to different people, different age groups that we had talked about before. So can you talk a little bit about kind of the inspiration and the name and the title, and then we'll kind of jump into what's inside the book itself.
Well, you know, life's moving very fast these days. I think people like shortcuts. And it turns out that shortcuts are legitimate. They're called heuristics, they're called memes. And I thought it would be fun to have a collection of them all in one place that young people especially could use as they were finding their way through the work world. We tested two titles. We tested the word hacks and we tested the word, I think it was shortcuts or something. And all the older people love shortcuts because it sounded, I guess, more legitimate. A hack for older people is something that's illegal or, you know, wrong. But kids love the word hack, and I was fine with it. And it turns out we made the right decision.
Oh, terrific. So talk about, where do you want to start with the book? You've got a lot of things if we talk about, let's say, maybe communications. And one of the things you talk about is emails. What might be some of the top mistakes people are making when they're getting ready to send a work email, personal email? Sure.
Well, emails, again, one of those really fast things, and we don't give it a lot of thought. We bang it out. We don't check the subject line. We're all about us when we're writing our email, right? So we'll send an email out with the subject line Friday.
Yeah. Okay.
But when I receive an email with the subject line Friday, I'm thinking this Friday, last Friday, next Friday, what about Friday? And we know through studying the science of email and communication, we're looking at things like open rates, read rates. In order to have people really process your emails, you have to have the ecosystem of the email body in the subject line. Right. So tell me what it is about Friday. Tell me what time on Friday. Compel me to open the email now because, and that's the title of the topic in the book, Composing the Perfect Email. How do you get your email open using strategies while writing it? And the subject line is one of those tips in the book. So to be compelling and to have people make that flash judgment, yeah, I'm going to move this email to the top of my to-do list and have it answered right now. Which is true, because I think, you know, you get so many emails, you might see who it's from, you see the subject line, and then you either open it or don't, between the combination of the name and that. If you're going to do a subject line, or if you're going to do it all caps, or what will capture someone besides just Friday? There's some do's and don'ts in a subject line that can really say, hey, you know, you do want to open this. This is important. You bet. We want to stay somewhere between 3 and 7 words. More than that, and on a telephone, for example, it starts to truncate the subject line. We know that all caps is called flaming. It's the equivalent of shouting in real life. So it's a no-no. I know some spam triggers that are actually set in motion because of all caps in the subject line. So you could actually hurt your delivery rate by using all caps in the subject line. Also, just plain old psychology works, like appealing to people's senses and emotions. And, you know, for example, my Rotary Club right now is marketing a wine tasting. It's a fundraiser for the club, but it's a party for the attendees. So we never use the word fundraiser in the subject line. It's not important to other people, right? The word party is important. So word substitution like that is really a crafty way to go about getting your emails open. What if they do open it up? How do you grab them at the very beginning? What's a good starter on the email, and what's a good killer on the email? Well, compliments are always great, right? To say something sincere to them, like I miss you, or I hope to see you at the wine tasting, I've always liked your style, is a nice thing. And these are personal emails you're referring to, not necessarily work ones, but even on a work level, I think you'd be more careful about the compliment if it's a work email, but I think appealing to people's sense of self-esteem is always a good thing. We also know that every email should have a call to action. You might remember from my previous visits that I teach presentation skills, so I always say everything is a presentation, including the email, and that every presentation should have a call to action. So at the end of the email, you want to actually tell them what to do. What do you want me to do as a result of opening your email about the wine tasting? Do you want me to register? If so, where do I click? Do you want me to bring a friend? If so, is there something else I should know? So all of these things, I think, are essential. There's another rule about emails is that you never put more than one to-do in the email. It's always about one thing, right? Because if it's too complicated, people won't answer it, or the email starts to become some sort of an email chain, and that's the worst.
Now, you mentioned earlier not to use caps. How would you recommend, though, emphasizing something that you want to call attention to if you don't use caps? Is it parentheses? Is it, or I mean, quotes? Is it trying to highlight in color, underline it? You know, how is it that you can still draw attention to some real important keywords without capitalization?
Well, you said I think you said something very key just now, and that is key words, because words can actually draw attention, right? If you've got a good vocabulary, or if you're planning the email a little bit in advance, you can use the exact words to get the job done, and you don't have to depend so much on punctuation. There's a rule in writing that one exclamation mark probably does it. You don't need 17 or 4 or 3, just one good one. If you're in the
be guilty of some of that.
No, that's all right. But if you're in the subject line, there's not a whole lot of or adornment that you can give it. You can't do bold and italics, I don't think, in subject lines. But it's probably not best to do that anyway. You want to stay clean, keep the language clean, as I said, short number of words. There are tricks that you can use in the email to kind of get people to go to certain sections like color and stuff like that. But we also know that by putting too much of this adornment in the email, it can get caught up in spam filters. It can ultimately distract people from the ultimate message, which is the call to action.
Okay. Now, if someone is what if they've called to action and it's been a few days and they still haven't heard from people, and it's key, they need to, and maybe it's a group of folks, so maybe it's not an individual phone call, which if it's one-on-one might be more effective. But if you've got a group of 5 or 6, you're still not hearing responses back, let's say it's a work email, how do you go ahead, try to ask again, you know, and send that second email that hopefully that one will, you know, get
One of my favorite techniques is to put 2 words into the subject line. You can actually resend the same email, but you would change the subject line and add these 2 words at the beginning of the subject line: second request. Right? Because second request has that big implication, like, I didn't hear back from you the first time. I was chastised recently by a work associate who said, why do you have to put second request? You know, I was going to get back to you, but there was a time expiration on the first request, and I hadn't heard back. And by the way, the word second request got her to reply.
So there you go.
Yeah, so it's a polite way of saying, you know, you might have missed it the first time, and here I am again. And another technique that you have to be careful of is a CC. So you can CC other people. It's easy for someone to ignore you if you email them, but it's harder for them to ignore 4 people that received the email or 3 people that received the email. So in work, you have to be careful about who you CC, because you can embarrass people. For example, second request and CC their boss, probably not a good idea.
Right.
But there are all kinds of ways to get attention. Essentially, we're fighting for people's attention, Cindy. It's a busy world out there, and as many ways that you can to get your email to the head of the reply list will be good for you. Okay.
Do you have a philosophy on blind copying someone, using the BCC on an email?
Yeah, it's not my favorite technique. I don't think there's anything ethically wrong with it, but it's not my favorite way to do things. What happens is, and this is the worst thing that can happen, is that the person who was BCC'd butts into the conversation later on, and they're not supposed to know anything, and now you've been outed, right? So it's probably a good idea to just CC if you need to, but stay away from the BCC as much as possible. It's like I say, there's nothing. I don't think it's unethical, but it's probably not the straightforward.
Like you say, could blow up on you, because they might be going through the email so fast and realize it's not a BCC. I think it's a CC, and again, like you said, comment, and then that could be.
It reminds me of this thing called the Chinese wall, where I'm going to tell you something, but only if you can keep it a secret. Now that we've got all these, it's too complicated. Let's just stay open and transparent. It's probably a safer way to communicate.
As we know, between our personal lives and our professional lives, there's emojis, there's LOLs, there's a lot of those different things that you might use on a text or on your phone with friends. How do you see some of that creeping in from a personal into a professional? What is acceptable maybe to be used maybe in a professional environment? Some
well,
of those
it's already happening, right?
Emojis. And
yeah, I mean, texting on the phone, all the emojis are there for you, and if you type the word heart, 5 different types of hearts come up, and so what I've discovered, and I didn't know this, that they would be so popular, you know. I don't use them much. I use them on occasion. I almost never use them in a business context. But it turns out a lot of people like these things. And I think we are developing this like shortcut for communicating. Right. We're seeing new words added to the dictionary every year. Right. Whether you like the word or not, it's almost like the tail's wagging the dog. If enough people do it, it becomes the thing. It becomes the standard. So it's not so much about what I like or what I would endorse. It's kind of like where society's going. So we want to, I think, temper it to the best we can to our own personalities, certainly to our own work cultures. I remember when different color, I'm old, man. I remember when different color pens started to come out, and you had these purple pens with fuzzy tops on them, and someone pulled it out in a professional setting. I'm like, what's this now? You know? And yet that's where we were going. You know, you see, if you're at the bank, the teller line's using these kinds of things all the time, and banks used to be the utmost in professionalism. It used to be that we had this kind of a very strict standard, but you know, every day is casual Friday now. Right,
that's true. Things change in that. If we're going to just close out with some things with email, you talk about in the book the signature, your signature, which, you know, in an email. What are some do's and don'ts maybe that people should do if they're doing a signature, let's say, in a professional email for work?
Sure. Well, I'm a promoter, and I like to tell people what's going on, and I like to share, you know, and so I like at least one or two links in the email that talk about maybe my website, send you to my website, or send you to the wine tasting that we're promoting, right? I think you get in trouble when you start dropping political things in there or anything that can be interpreted as incendiary. I like motivational quotations. I like a little bit of personality in the signature file because it makes you human, right? I know not everybody agrees with this, but this has been my stripe for a long time. I advise it for most people because I think we could have more fun. I think we could open up a little bit about ourselves and not make everything such like a task all of the time. So I rather like the you know, a little bit of stylistic things happening in the signature file.
Does it matter if it's they use multiple colors, italics, you know, anything like that when they do that, or is there any pertinent information like their phone number, you know, things like that, their title, things like that they should include in there as a signature?
Certainly the phone number, contact information. I'm not sure you want to put in a lot of frills and bells and whistles again, because it can again distract from the overall message and your level of professionalism. I can tell sometimes who people are just by what they don't include. For example, someone who has a phone number but no area code probably has a pretty small world, right? And so if you want to represent yourself as a person of the world, then you have to act like one. You have to have a 10-digit phone number. You should probably have a legitimate email address and not, a lot of people are still using AOL addresses. And Yahoo, with all of the problems that they've been having, still with Yahoo. It's a personal decision, but I do think people can tell who you are by how you write, what's in your email, and especially to your point, what's in the signature file.
Okay, and I think what's helpful too is, you know, like you said, how you write, and not just the words, but I think the spell checker. So hopefully, you know, whatever your email is has the spell checker, because thank goodness it's helped me, even on words that are a little iffy. You know, is it an A, is it an E? But you know, sometimes just overall, I think.
Yeah,
it can really
and even more than spell checker, how about just emotion checker? How about with really important emails that you would let it sit overnight, or let it sit for an hour, leave your desk, get up and walk away, make sure you're not saying something in anger. Email and texting is so tough, Cindy, because there's no context, right? Humor doesn't translate, inference doesn't translate, metaphors don't make it sometimes across the electronic divide, and so you want to write plainly and simply so that it can't be interpreted, and that's when the emojis come in handy. If you're kidding, a little wink is, a little wink is a
That'll
good
help,
thing.
because sometimes you can't tell in the words.
You bet.
Is there a philosophy you want to share with people? Is it 24 hours? Is it a few hours? If you get an email and infuriates you, and you just want to, you know, write something down and then hit that send button, what are some tips that people can do to? Well,
one of my favorite tips is to actually, change the modality. Is call the person. Because just because they chose, and I know the communication standard is if someone emails you, you email them back. If they call you, you call them back. You don't mix it up.
Right.
And yet, if the email's really tough and is emotion laden, maybe it's better to pick up the phone. Maybe it's better to actually go visit with the person and sort this out. And then if you need to reply to the email so that the official paper trail has your stamp, and has the results of that personal meeting, I think that's the best way to go.
Right.
Sometimes email's not the best default.
That's true. And you're right. People do. If you call, you call. Email, you email. You don't. Sometimes you don't mix the two.
That's right. My favorite question, by the way, is when people say, "Did you get my email?" Rather, which one?
Yeah,
man?
which one? Or you didn't respond, so I wasn't sure if you got it.
That's
or,
right.
Yeah. That's a great thing. The question I just thought about. What about people who put read receipt on everything?
Yeah.
I mean, it's as a person who, you know, and somebody has, and of course I'll hit, yeah, okay, I'll respond to read receipt, you know, because you're asked for it, you know, I'll respond, but I know sometimes people just use it all the time, and so I'm just wondering
well, we don't have
why
control.
necessarily, but
I don't know why either, but we don't have control over what other people do.
I mean, if they use it all the time, I totally understand if, you know, if I'm sending something, I really got to know if these 3 people did receive it or not, just because you said it's time sensitive or something very important or whatever, or I need to follow up, I might put it, but I usually use it rarely.
Yeah, I say let's not stop talking to each other. You know, I have friends that want to CC everybody, and then everybody that's been CC'd replies to the email. And you know, if you know anything about email at all, you know that the CC means you're just getting a copy of it. You don't have to reply. In fact, it's better if you don't. And sometimes I'll call somebody and say, listen, you know, you don't need to reply to all the CCs. And sometimes that suggestion is taken well. Sometimes people think I'm micromanaging, but we try to keep the communication channel clean for everybody, right? We're all kind of looking out after each other. So I don't mind making that call once in a while.
You alluded to, you actually mentioned something a little earlier I wanted to touch upon. If someone sends you an email, like you said, maybe you're a little bothered by it, you call them so-and-so, or you want to just document a conversation, you want to document decisions or something.
Right.
Do you have a best way that someone should approach doing that in an email, just to, you know, unfortunately maybe cover all your bases by doing something like that, to have at least an email track, you know, or some history to go back to?
Yeah, if you do that, I'd like to see the time frames in there and what exactly is expected of me, right? There are people that want to CYA, cover their butt, and they would say, you know, here come the email streams now, so that my boss knows that I communicated with you. Right. But I don't mind that, you know, but tell me specifically what you want. And we know this from studying the call to action, is that the more specific you are when you tell people what you expect from them, the more likely you are to get it, right? So if you publish, for example, a timetable, now everybody has a copy of it. And if you want to stay ahead of the timetable, don't wait for people to disappoint you. Stay on them to the extent that you feel you need to. And you know, just because you kept a better paper trail in email than somebody else doesn't make you a better person, right? Our overall goal here is to keep people comfortable, not burn people out, right? And hopefully you get the job done in an efficient manner. So the politics of communication can sometimes overwhelm everything else.
When you mentioned it's real important to have action items in there, are there words that you should say an action item is, or how do you, because some people have a paragraph and you're trying to search for, like you said, what is it? What's the best way to present it? Is there some certain words that you might, you know, use and say, here's the action items, or here's what I'd like you to do?
Of course, and phrases, combinations of words, right? In fact, one of the topics in the WorkHacks book is the 15 most powerful words. So the 15 words come in phrases, right? Like, I am proud of you. What is your opinion? Very important phrase to use. Will you please? Why do we stop saying please? Just because we're in a hurry, right? Will you please? Thank you, very important couple of words to use. And I like to use the person's name in the subject line of the email. That way they can't be confused that it's spam or I'm sending it to everybody in the free world, right? So Cindy, would you please do this for me by Friday noon, right? And if you're a woman of the world, I'm going to put noon Eastern time, because it's noon at different times of the, you know, of the globe. So I like phrasing like that, certain phrases, and again, paying homage to the person, especially if you're working with others in the CC.
Compliment can go a long way.
And
not you know, being disrespectful, but one that's really, you know, earned, or that.
Sincere, sure.
Sincere.
But how about this? I haven't heard from you. You're normally so prompt. Right? Great, powerful message. It's subtle. It pays tribute to the other person. And yet it's going to help you accomplish your overall goal, which is, man, I need to hear from you. So it's good.
You mentioned something just there where I think is real important. What about folks that don't reply to you as quickly, but they expect you to reply to them? How do you try to help them realize what they do, or lack of what they do, and then they don't treat you as if they want to be treated by having that quick response?
Well, you never know what's going on somebody else's desk. You know, they're in a hurry to hear back from you. Sometimes they're in a hurry to hear back, but they don't tell you in the email.
Right.
I travel for a living, and I'm often out of pocket. I can't get to email if I'm standing in line at an airport or something. Yeah. And so I'll always apologize. I think that's a good way to start. Okay. I didn't know you needed to hear from me right away. Right. Or I apologize, I couldn't respond right away even though you needed me to. And hopefully develop a rhythm with people where they understand your schedule. One of the problems with email that's really got people all wrapped up is that we think we need to answer other people's email at their convenience. And the truth is you should answer email at your convenience.
Okay.
Right? Because you can't control how much email comes into your box. Right?
No,
or when.
Yeah.
So you get back to them when you can, and that's the realistic expectation, not that other people would have you jumping through hoops whenever they need an answer from you.
Right.
And hopefully by developing that rhythm with people, I think most people get it. You don't have that problem with too many people, I hope.
Well, hopefully not, you know. One thing you mentioned too is names and subject line, but what I'd like to do is kind of switch to something you've talked about in the book. When we, get away from the emails, and let's say now you've went to the wine tasting and you're meeting people, I think what you mentioned in the book too is real important, how you initiate the conversation and what you say. I'd like to talk a little bit about that, but I don't also want to lose the fact of how do people remember names, because I know that sometimes you're like, oh, they just said that, I don't remember their name, they just walked away, and you're like, you can't even remember the name. So maybe we can touch upon, maybe if we can touch first upon the name when you first meet someone, and also if it's a after work party, a wine tasting, or if it's a work event, and that is handshakes for men and women, what might be a good greeting? Just verbal these days, or what?
Well, let's start with the name game, which is a very popular question, especially with anybody who's doing business in social settings, or we're just meeting so many people these days. Names are a connection, and I mentioned earlier it's one of the favorite words the other person has, so it's really almost incumbent upon us to learn the other person's name and then use it. We hear it and we think we've learned it, but in fact it didn't really stick. Right. So one famous way to do that is just iteration, right? You want the word to kind of be stamped upon your brain many, many times in the first few seconds. So if I was meeting you at a cocktail party, I would say, hi, my name's Michael. You might say, my name's Cindy. So I've heard the name Cindy once. I repeat the name back to you right away. Cindy, nice to meet you. What brings you here, Cindy? Right. Now, if I do this too much, it's going to get creepy. But 3 times.
I was going to say after the. It's like, okay.
But 3 times is probably okay. You haven't thought too much of it so far. I might. Someone else might join us. Right. This happens often at cocktail parties. Hey, Jack. Nice to see you. Have you met Cindy? Cindy. Jack. Yeah. So far, still not creepy, right? No, now it's 4 or 5 times, right? And I probably say this to you before I said goodbye. Cindy, what a pleasure to meet you. I'll see you later on in the event. So now I'll never forget your name, and I've honored you with your favorite word.
One of the favorite words someone has, of course, themselves.
And of course, we mentioned using the name in the subject line of the email, in the call to action of the email. This is like a touchstone. It really gets to people's brainstem to call them by their favorite word. So this is a good way to use names not only in email, written communication, but also in verbal communication. You mentioned a couple of other tricks for the, we're using the wine setting.
If you're first walking in, you mentioned too, if you initiate the conversation, and you walk up to somebody to start the conversation.
Sure, so we're looking for continuity. Let's use the wine example. Okay. I'm assuming you received an email to come to the event. Maybe that's not true, but I might say, hi, my name's Michael, nice to see you. What brings you to our wine tasting? You might say, well, you've been hammering me with emails. You might say, I saw an ad in the paper. You're going to tell me how you got there. But if I'm an event planner, that's good for me to know, and I'm getting some orientation about who you are as a person, right? You're an email person, or you're a billboard person, or you're a red wine person. But I'm looking in a social situation, I'm looking for connections. I'm looking for ways that I can explore the relationship. And we're doing it standing up, holding food, and a glass of wine. So it's not an easy juggling act.
Right.
So this idea of staying on message and trying to help the person feel comfortable. But one of the things I like the most, Cindy, is always we're moving toward an end. We're moving toward the next thing. I always call it, it's not what's next, it's what comes next after what comes next. Like, what's the next event that my Rotary Club's going to be hosting? You're already at the wine tasting.
Right. How do you get that person to come the next
Might you
one?
be interested in the next event?
Right.
And so and that's how I stay away from talking about arcane things like sports and weather. Right. So what are your interests? What do you like to do for fun? Right. And then pretty soon we're talking about the next event, should you choose to come. Right. And I think that provides continuity in the relationship, and I think that's what really help people feel comfortable.
Right. Now, if you're in the party and are there tips for somebody to just kind of break the ice with someone? If you're walking in the room, you don't know anybody, and you know, how do you break that ice, and how do you just approach people without talking the weather, you know? Or
you have to do something your mother told you never to do.
Yeah.
You have to interrupt.
Okay.
And this is hard for people because we all were raised with this advice, never interrupt another person. Right. But if you ever walked into a party and everybody's talking as if they already know each other, and you'd be standing there alone the whole night if you honored, you know, your mother. Right. So you have to walk up to people and say, excuse me for interrupting, you guys look like you're having such a good time, or excuse me for interrupting, you are the best looking group of people in the room tonight, I just wanted to start here, or excuse me, I wanted to say hi before the official program begins, because once that starts, we won't be able to talk, my name's Michael, and you hold out your hand, and what you discover, Cindy, is that other people are just talking about arcane things like the sports and weather. They're waiting for someone to interrupt.
So somebody,
someone who's more interesting than the person they're talking to. Right. And you probably are, right? And so this idea of having permission, giving yourself permission to interrupt even the important looking people. Right. And that's an important thing to remember too, is that everyone at an event is not equal. Some people are worth meeting more than others. I know that's not a politically correct thing to say. But if you have specific interests, you want to hook up with kindred spirits. Right. And when I say hook up, I just mean talk to.
To meet and greet.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think by making those kind of judgment calls from across the room, I want to work my way over here and say, hello, I'm already decided I'm going to have to interrupt to make this happen, and I'm going to apologize, and no one's going to think lesser of me for it. This is like one just chain of events, right, that happens very quickly. There's a real skill to working a room.
Right. Well, Michael, thank you so much for being with us here. Time flies by, as always. Thank you for what you've done here with WorkHacks and all the great tools. And I know there's a lot of great information in here for people, so thank you.
Yes, my pleasure. MichaelAngeloCaruso.com. And if they want to get the Kindle version, of course, it's available on Amazon.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you again. And I thank you for joining us and watching us. I'm Cindy Kainz.